DreAllDay.com.
Dre Baldwin, DreAllDay.com. Topic of this video: the majority is always wrong. The majority is always wrong. The reason why this is an important topic is because, first of all, one good thing, there's a lot of good things, but one good thing I want to point out that we've gotten from social media and the ubiquity of all of us being able to see what everybody else thinks and feels and is doing and is talking about. One good thing that we've gotten from that is that we get to see what everybody else is thinking, feeling, doing, and how they're responding to certain stimuli in the world. And this is one way that you can go and verify what I just told you, that the majority is always wrong about pretty much everything. And the reason why this is valuable for you is anytime you're in a situation, and this guy named Earl Nightingale, he made this tape back in the day, back when they literally were on tape. He made this audio tape called The Strangest Secret, which is one of the foundational pieces of personal development. And he said the following. He said, anytime you step into a new space and you want to be highly successful, but you don't know how to be successful, all you got to do is look around, see what everybody else is doing, see what the majority of people are doing, and do the opposite of that. That's how you get ahead of most people. And he was right. And that was like 60, 70 years ago. He said that. It's still true to this very day. Most people, by definition, and I'm going to break this down for you logically, how this makes sense. Most people, by definition, are average. Do you agree to that? That most people are average? I mean, that's the actual definition of the word average, where most people live. So most people are average. So if you do the same thing that most people do, then what are you going to be? You're going to be like most people, which means you're going to be average. So if you want to separate yourself from the masses of people, all you got to do is just differently than them, which is usually going to get you further ahead than them. And usually, simple way to make this decision, because look, you could do things that go against the grain that can make you worse than them, or things that go against the grain to make you better than them. So how do you know you're doing something that makes you better? Pick the thing that gives you more opportunity for growth, more opportunity for success, and is usually harder and will require more discipline, more mental toughness, more persistence, more grit, more determination. You just pick the thing that seems to be harder, more challenging, requires more mental toughness and more discipline, and is different than what everybody else is doing. Usually, in the long run, you're going to end up winning. This does not mean every single thing you do that is different than most people is always going to end up, making you super rich or amazingly successful over everybody else in the world. But similar to investing, for example, not every company you invest in is going to make you rich, but if you invest in a smart way, you have a formula for investing that works, and you follow it every single time you get into an investment, over the long run, you're going to make more money than you put in to investing, right? That's the whole point of having a formula. It's like you're a basketball player and you practice a lot. You have a formula for how you practice and how you play. It doesn't mean you're going to win every single game. Doesn't mean every shot you take is going to go in. But in the long run, if you have the right formula, in the long run, you're probably going to end up winning. You're a salesperson. You got a good product and a good sales process, and you know how to get the right leads. If you have 100 sales calls, you're probably going to end up making more money than it costs you to have the sales calls, even though not every person you talk to is going to buy. All right, so that's what it means when you have a formula. So this formula that I'm giving you is look at what the masses are doing, do the opposite of the masses. Now, of course, are there caveats to this? There's usually one idiot who wants to leave a comment when I put something out like this, like, well, Dre, they may not say this exact thing, but they'll say something like, well, most people won't run across the road in the middle of a highway, or most people don't jump off a building. So does that mean you should do the opposite of that? That's not what I mean. I'm saying anything where there's some plausible reason why you might question the accepted process. So if the accepted process is don't run across the highway, and there's no plausible reason to challenge it, then that one you can go along with everybody else. If there's a plausible question, for example, most people clock in to work at 9 o'clock on the dot, they clock out at 5 o'clock on the dot, they never do anything above and beyond what they're asked to do at their job, and most people are average at the job, you might want to question that. Or why are most people average at the job? Well, maybe it's because they only do the bare minimum of what they're asked to do. So maybe if I did a little bit different than that, I might be able to get a little bit ahead of them. That's where you can question it and maybe find an opportunity to do something different than what everyone else is doing. And speaking of that, for example, there's this guy who was in sales, and he was working from 9 to 5, and there was a bunch of people on the sales team, and he was trying to make sales, and he made all these calls, and he would spend all day 9 to 5 making calls after call, and he wasn't really making any sales. And he was trying to figure out, how am I going to get ahead? Because most of the people who worked there, some of them were getting a few more sales than him because they had been there longer, but nobody was really standing out. So he decided to do the opposite of what everybody else was doing. So he did literally the opposite. This is what he would do. He would get to work early, and from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, he would make sales calls. And then from 5 o'clock p.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. after work, after quote-unquote work time, he would make more sales calls. So he was only working 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day. And he started making a lot more sales, not because he got better at selling, but simply because he was calling his prospects at a time when nobody else was calling. And he figured that the people he was trying to call, the decision makers, the people who controlled the money, they were usually available before work and after work, because these are the decision makers. The decision makers usually were at work during off-peak hours, outside of the times that the average people were at work. So he actually had a good formula, and by using that formula, he was able to make more sales than everybody else, even though his skill level was not that much higher. So this is an example of doing something different than what everybody else is doing. So I want you all to look at your life, look at your actions, look at the decisions that you make, see what the majority is doing. Keep in mind that the majority is always wrong about pretty much everything, and start doing the opposite of anything that you see them doing, and you have created a great opportunity for yourself that can be exploited consistently. You just got to look around and see what they're doing and know that your opportunity is always, as I talk about in episode 1025 of my podcast, opportunity is always in the opposites. Opportunity is always in looking at what is the accepted reality and doing different than the accepted reality. Here's the challenge with this. I got to tell you everything. Challenge with this, opportunity being in the opposites and the majority always being wrong, is that emotionally, the challenge is not logical. The challenge is emotional. The reason why the challenge is emotional is because when you find yourself doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing, at first, and maybe even in the middle, and maybe even in the end, and the whole process, you're going to feel very awkward. And the reason you're going to feel awkward is because you're going to be the only one thinking what you're thinking. You're going to be the only one doing what you're doing while everybody else is doing something different. So you're going to get people who will be looking at you crazy. You're going to get people who might say that you're crazy, people who might talk to you crazy. People are going to tell you that you're going to get in trouble, or people are going to tell you that you're messing up, or people are going to question you and say, well, there must be something. They're going to come up with all kinds of rationalizations as to why you are the one who's wrong, because you are doing something different than what they and everybody else is doing. Any of you over the last couple of years, right? I mean, we've seen so many examples of this. If you are a person who, when that COVID jab came out, you decided not to take it, and you expressed to people that you didn't take it, all right, did you have people say that you must be crazy, or that you're doing something wrong, or you're hurting public health, or you're going to kill grandma, or you didn't get your kids the jab? Are you crazy? You're not wearing a mask, you're going to hurt everybody, you're going to kill everyone, you're affecting everybody's health. You had people telling you that, right? Because you weren't doing what the majority was doing. So can you emotionally deal with the fact that you're going to feel like you are an outsider or an outcast, or you're going against the grain? Because that's literally what you are. You are an outsider, you are an outcast, and you are going against the grain because you're not doing what everybody else is doing. As long as you can deal with that emotionally, logically, you will see over time that what you did makes sense. All right, and that's the way it works. While keeping in mind, one last thing that I'll tell you is that even in the long run, when it becomes obvious that you going against the grain was actually the smart one, while everybody else was the idiot sheep following the crowd and ended up wrong, most of those people who were the sheep who followed the crowd will never come around and admit that they were dummies for following the crowd. They'll never come around and admit that you were right for going against the grain, or never admit that they probably should have did what you did, but they were too dumb or too much of a sheep or too much of a follower or too scared to do it. They'll never admit that. So do not go through your life expecting them to finally admit that they were wrong and you were right. For most people, that's never going to happen, because most people, they have this amazing ability, what we call rationalization. Is what all human beings do, is when we craft stories to make ourselves feel good about something that might be some complete bullshit, but we get really good at this, and human beings are great at rationalization. So there are people out there who took the jab and still went and got sick right after they took the jab, even though it was supposed to keep you from getting the disease, but they've come up with some rationalization that makes them feel smart about that. And they'll never admit that they got duped. They'll never admit that they got bullied. They'll never admit that they got pushed into doing something that actually was a bad idea and that you were right and they were wrong. That's never going to happen. So don't go through life expecting that. Just keep in mind with yourself, when you're looking in the mirror, when you go to sleep at night, that you did the thing that made the most sense for you. Do not expect to get credit from other people from this, because most other human beings, as I just told you, they're sheep, they're followers, they do what they're told, and they do what they see everybody else doing. Even when it turns out and it's painfully obvious that they made a mistake, they will never admit it. So don't expect that. Now, with all that said, text me. Tell me the best point you got from this video. My number is 305-384-6894. And Work on Your Game University. That's the place where all my courses are. That's the place you can get coached directly by me. We got two ways you can get involved. You can get involved either by getting access to all of our courses. You can take those at your own pace. And we have 40 plus courses there, so you will have plenty of material for a long time by joining at that level. Or the other level is you can get access to all the courses as well as being coached by me directly. So if you want to be coached by me directly, you got to get on a call with me first, and we're selective about who we let get into the coaching program. I do not coach everybody, but anybody can get access to the courses. So just go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You'll see everything that you get there and all your options. And my text number and the link to the university are down below in the description to this video. Work on your game. Dre, all